Oftentimes you say things which are very smart, but I agree with very little. And like, this is one of those situations.
Welcome to On Deadline, the Washington Examiner's political game show. I'm Tiana Lowe Doescher.
And I'm Christian Datoc.
During the show, we give our takes on the biggest stories of the week, and you get to vote on who wins. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. For the start of the show, we begin above the fold. Christian, what's the most important story you're following?
Well, Tiana, we know that Democrats are still trying to process the results of the election from the other week, and we're starting to see some conspiracy theories enter the chat. Now, that didn't help Trump back in 2020, and it certainly won't help Harris this year. One of the biggest stories that we're covering right now is Jamal Simmons, Kamala Harris's former communications director. He went on CNN and flat out said that he expects Joe Biden to resign
in the next 30 days, make Kamala Harris the president of the United States.
Whoa. Nice and dandy, right? Here's the problem. This doesn't help Democrats at all. In fact, this type of thinking is what got them in this problem in the first place. Joe Biden loves being in government, and Kamala Harris didn't win a damn thing. Installing her now cheapens the idea of the first female president. Let's look at the votes. Kamala Harris wins 72 million or so, right? That's 8 million fewer than Joe Biden. Donald Trump only won 2 million more votes than he did before. It's clear Democratic voters thought the party had abandoned them, they had an enthusiasm problem, and pushing this type of rhetoric and making a move like this will only further alienate voters.
And you are very correct that Republicans, when they didn't reckon with why they lost in 2020, it arguably led to the red wave that wasn't in 2022, where they had incredibly poor candidate quality that tanked their odds in the midterms, giving Democrats the best midterm defense odds in, 100 years. But the issue, I think, goes back further before Trump. 2016, did Democrats ever really reckon with why Hillary Clinton lost? Did they ever reckon with the fact that the primary indeed was rigged against Bernie Sanders?
I am very proud to be the only candidate up here who does not have a super PAC, who is not raising huge sums of money from Wall Street or special interests.
Is there any institutional willingness for Democrats to look inward at the party and see a structural problem?
There's no institutional willingness, and that's why you have to change the institution. I mean, the problem starts at the top. Think about who is the most powerful politician in the Democratic Party right now. It's not Joe Biden, it's not Kamala Harris, it might be Barack Obama, but it might also be Nancy Pelosi, who stepped down from her leadership role and filed papers this week to run again in 2026. They need a change at the top of the party. Otherwise, it's going to be a repeat in future elections. So, Tiana, what's the big story that's on your mind this week?
A multi-ethnic working class coalition delivered Republicans not just the White House, but both chambers in Congress in a repudiation of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, specifically because of the economy. Donald Trump must use the moment and the margins to pass his economic legacy. How this begins: reverse Bidenomics and build off of the initial Trump tax cuts. You make the individual expiring portions of the TCJA from 2017 permanent, and that saves 62% of taxpayers from facing a tax hike next year. You also increase the child tax credit from $2,000 to $3,000, and how do you pay for it? And how do you reduce inflation at the same time? Easy. Get rid of the state and local tax deduction, the mortgage interest deduction, both of which disproportionately benefit the wealthy, and repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. This saves money, slows down inflation, and brings real disposable income gains to working families.
Tiana, that all sounds well and good, and while Donald Trump was able to pass his tax cuts plan in early 2017, shortly into his presidency, he's talked about doing a whole lot more on day one than he did back in 2016. Do you think the economy and taxes, cutting taxes for voters on both sides of the aisle, is the number one issue for Trump, or will it get lost to the border or shrinking the federal government? Anything he's talked about on the campaign trail?
This is a plan that is workable through reconciliation, whereas a lot of his new proposals, no tax on tips, right? Not only will you likely need more than just a 50-vote majority plus J.D. Vance, but also they don't have the same macroeconomic benefits, right? Preventing the expiration of the individual tax cuts will help keep employment high. And again, you're able to do this in a way that does not increase the deficit and likely would reduce it. And that The deficit right now is one of the primary drivers of still persistent inflation.
It's time for Yeas and Nays, where we give our opinion on the week's biggest stories. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree, but you get to pick a winner.
Matt Gaetz is a serious nominee for Attorney General.
Oh, this is obviously a serious nomination. I mean, Donald Trump, he rewards loyalty above all. And Matt Gaetz is many things, a pariah among his own colleagues, among the Republican conference, but he is certainly loyal to Donald Trump. I mean, this is a guy who risked it all, trying to tank, not only budget deals, but an immigration plan because it would benefit Donald Trump. So they thought, I expect him to go forward through the confirmation process. I don't expect him to be confirmed, though.
I don't think it's serious, not because Trump doesn't want to reward Gaetz, but because perhaps there is a larger strategy here at play. Matt Gaetz is not crazy, at least I don't think, but he does not have any experience in criminal law, and he only spent 2 years practicing civil law in the private sector, right? This is not someone that's ever ran a Justice Department. And for that reason alone, he's a questionable pick, especially when you consider Trump's big ambitions, and I think justified ambitions, to clean out the DOJ. I think this is one of those nominations that allows the purple state senators up for re-election, like Susan Collins, like Tom Tillis, who need to have something to prove they have some anti-Trump bona fides, where they can vote against Matt Gaetz, and then there's a vacancy in the Senate. Donald Trump goes to Governor Ron DeSantis and says, who should refill Marco Rubio's Senate seat as he goes to run the State Department? Perhaps it should be Matt Gaetz. That's a lot easier and ask for Donald Trump, and that's a job basically for life. Is Attorney General Matt Gaetz for real? Do you agree with me or do you agree with Christian? Let us know in the comments.
After the 2024 presidential election, the Democratic Party will have a donor problem.
Absolutely.
I'm
Look,
saying no on this.
It's Kamala Harris inherited a $250 million war chest from Joe Biden's campaign. Democrats then donated another $1 billion to her particularly. She burned through $1.25 billion to lose 7 swing states to Donald Trump and end up $20 million in debt. And we all know why, right? Because the Democratic Party and the media, I repeat myself, concealed Joe Biden's condition for 3.5 years. And then after rigging the primary, so that way Dean Phillips, Marianne Williamson couldn't even appear on ballots in multiple states. Then once, he imploded on a debate stage with Donald Trump.
And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we can do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
They replaced him with a candidate who did not make it to the Iowa caucuses in 2020, right? I think this was the last gasp of the Democratic Party having complete control over selecting candidates, just like they did in 2016. And it's clear they have a crisis, right? They've lost now twice to Donald Trump in 8 years. And this time they did it despite all the lawfare, despite all the and they lost Nevada, a blue stronghold. I don't, sure they'll always have the high dollar donors. They'll still have Beyonce. They'll still have Oprah, who will still take $1 million.
But wait a minute, Oprah was paid. There was an FEC thing.
Her company was paid to host an event.
Okay. They paid her company $1 million, dude.
Is it true that they paid you $1 million for the endorsement for Kamala?
Not true.
Not true, okay.
I was paid nothing, ever.
Washington Examiner reporting that money was spent in ways, I guess you could argue, maybe.
Well, they spent six figures. Campaign spent at least $15 million on event production, FEC records show, with many payments lining up with high-profile events and concerts with celebrity attendees or performers.
And that's how you do it, because it's a performance.
Right. So you pay them
so you
for
can pay them to perform. That's the difference.
That's the difference.
But will they have the small dollar donors? I don't see it.
Tiana, oftentimes you say things which are very smart, but I agree with very little. And this is one of those situations, because let's be honest, I agree with you. Democratic donors have the Democratic Party has a stranglehold on those big dollar celebrity donors. But who's going to care about this election more? Somebody in their Malibu penthouse or someone in a red state who is worried about whether or not there are going to be new abortion bans put in at the state level? Democrats will continue to receive huge fundraising numbers from small grassroots donors, but it's going to be directed at individual candidates and at activist groups. You're not going to see the huge, Act Blue solicitations from a presidential ticket. I also expect presidential primaries are going to become a lot more contentious for Democrats because you have the progressive wing of the party saying, listen, guys, you had your 4 years in the sun and you let Donald Trump back in office. It's time we take over, and we need money to do it. Democrats will continue receiving money. It's just going to be handled in a slightly different way than it was this year.
The FEMA Trump supporter scandal will disappear after the inauguration.
I'm going to say yes on this one, mostly because, let's be honest, people don't care about FEMA at all, except in the immediate aftermath of a natural disaster. And yes, we are still grappling with the fallout from hurricanes Milton and Helene. But again, this is going to get memory hold as soon as Trump gets in office and starts deporting people left and right. There are bigger fish to fry. Also, you have to question this woman's credibility a bit. I mean, there's not a lot we know about. Maybe there will be more whistleblowers coming forward. But it sounds like to me this specific person was taking advantage of ongoing practices and protocols at FEMA because she just didn't want to go to Trump voters. It's not a systemic problem.
I take issue with the passive voice because I don't think it's going to be memory hold. I think the media will intentionally try to bury it because they don't have any interest in the claims that Marnie Washington is making, and we don't know if they are true or not, but they're pretty easily falsifiable claims. Either she was a lone wolf and you can prove in documents that there was a chain of command where she was reprimanded, or she can put up or shut up. And it's why I'm glad that the Florida Attorney General will be investigating this, because the media has no interest in it, and they don't want any story that shows that the bloat of the federal government is using taxpayer money against the taxpayers.
I do want to give a quick shout out to some of our own original reporting. We got a scoop about what's going to be happening at this FEMA hearing on Capitol Hill about this specific scandal. Go check it out on the website.
Now it's time to fill in the blank.
Blank would have been a better choice for HHS director than Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
The homeless guy that sleeps outside my bodega, who also coincidentally has probably done less heroin than RFK Jr.
We don't know that for a fact.
Probably.
Yeah.
Dude did a lot of drugs back in the day, per his own admission. No, I mean, HHS is in charge of CDC, FDA, NIH, SAMHSA, all of Medicare and Medicaid,
CMS,
which
yeah.
is, the third largest line item in the federal budget. No, and this is someone that has a complete disdain for the scientific method, right? However much I detested the COVID regime and Fauciism and, I think it's clear that the response to overstepping on 2020, he is the worst possible messenger, right? Whatever you think about the COVID vaccines, the measles MMR vaccine does not cause autism. HPV vaccine does not cause cancer, and fluoride is not killing your kids. All it is doing in the small amounts that it is in the water is preventing cavities on a marginal level. It's a joke pick. I'll take Matt Gaetz as AG any day over this.
I understand that Trump owes RFK something, and that the idea of not trusting the science or being skeptical of vaccines is pretty prevalent in his inner circle. But there's also another guy in his inner circle who will be a great pick, and that's Dr. Ben Carson, again, a famed neurosurgeon and Trump alum from the first administration.
Loyal soldier.
Yeah, I mean, I truly think one of Trump's biggest mistakes was wasting Ben Carson at HUD during that first administration.
I mean, he did a shockingly decent job,
He did fine, but he's wasted.
Yeah.
He's a brilliant medical mind. Why not put him at the agency that, has to do with all the medical stuff? It makes perfect sense to me.
It says blank that Democrats are backing Senator Marco Rubio for Secretary of State.
It sends a strong message to China, I want to say, because let's be honest, Marco Rubio is the only nominee that Trump has put forward so far who is getting Democratic support. You got John Fetterman, you've got Mark Warner. I think Marco Rubio, again, who himself, he is personally sanctioned by China. He's not even allowed to travel to the country right now. But again, I think this is a strong indication that both parties are finally coming to the table and agreeing China is the strongest threat posed to America right now. It's not Russia. It's not anything in the Middle East. We need to tackle this wholly as an administration, work with our friends across the aisle, and try and avert a crisis which appears like we're careening towards right now.
Yeah, it says that Trump's, let's call it Jacksonian realism, has won. I think it's pretty clear that the Bush era of democracy promotion has failed. The Obama order of just appeasing our allies has failed. There is a widespread rejection of Biden trying to bring about the multipolar world. That has failed. Peace through strength, a middle way, not being a neocon, right? Marco Rubio is not a neocon. What he will value are strategic relationships to consolidate against what I think we can consider the modern day axis of evil. That is China financing Russia, financing Iran, financing North Korea, financing Venezuela, and embracing our allies. And Marco Rubio is clear-headed. He's great on this. This is great Trump in a pick that's fairly expected, but no less welcome.
I also think, again, it probably helps that Marco Rubio, as Senate Foreign Affairs alum, he is known to the leaders in NATO. And with the emphasis that Trump is going to be putting on our allies to meet their defense requirements, otherwise don't expect help from the United States, it's going to sort of help balance that relationship that I do think Trump struggled with in his first term in office.
Donald Trump should make nice with blank.
This is tough. I mean, there's so many people on that list, on his enemy list. I think, honestly, the person he should probably make nice with the most is his daughter, Ivanka Trump. We do know she's not going to be involved at the start of the administration, but she was quietly one of the most effective advisors in his first term in office.
As was Jared Kushner.
As he was too, and I expect Jared Kushner, to be honest, to stay away so that he can, rake in some of that money that'll come along the way with the Trump presidency. But seriously, I think people underestimate how important Ivanka was to keeping what was truly an absolutely chaotic administration under control. Everyone in that first administration liked her. She was able to bridge the divide between, Peter Navarro and whoever he might have pissed off in the West Wing this week. It's imperative for Trump to bring her back into the fold.
Yeah, for all that, I think it's fun to dunk on Nepo babies. I do think people don't understand, like Javanka as they were called, how effective they were for being political neophytes. But I don't know if they've had a falling out with Trump so much as Ivanka probably just enjoys being hot and rich and living in Miami or whatnot. I think Trump needs to bring back for the final rose ceremony Mick Mulvaney to run the OMB.
Okay.
Mick Mulvaney, at his core, is a Tea Partier. He wants to cut all the spending, and he's smart about doing it in a way that doesn't undermine Trump's agenda. He was one of the most effective, if not the most, OMB directors we have ever had in this country. And he kept on being put in by Trump in other positions to be acting ambassador to Ireland.
Acting chief of staff.
Acting chief of staff, acting whatever. No, don't make him an acting something. Just plant him in the OMB for the next 4 years, and he can work with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to cut, like Edward Scissorhands. That's all I want.
Don't forget to let us know in the comments who you think Donald Trump needs to bring into the fold the most. There's a lot of names we didn't put out there. Omarosa,
Anthony Scaramucci,
Jenna Ellis, the list goes on.
Please no.
The Federal Reserve must blank in response to both consumer and wholesale inflation, both back on the rise for the first time in 2 years.
I know you're going to come at this with a lot of numbers and facts because you are an economist. The Federal Reserve should do nothing right now, okay? We've had rate hikes, excluding the past, I think, 6 to 8 months for 3 years straight now, and it's sent the economy into an extremely precipitous position. Jerome Powell is going to stay on as chairman of the Fed board, right? If he does something to piss off Donald Trump before he's even in office, be it raising rates or lowering, cutting by a few basis points, and then that doesn't stop this inflation trend that we've seen over October, he's going to have hell to pay. And again, I don't think Donald Trump will appreciate it if the Federal Reserve does anything to play with people's bottom lines heading into Inauguration Day.
I actually agree with you.
Okay.
I think the Fed just should pause, right? Right now, bond markets are expecting another rate cut. That would be a mistake because clearly employment hasn't tanked, right? We posted incredibly low jobless claims this week. And inflation, there is a modest increase in both consumer inflation and then also producer inflation, which is usually a leading indicator. So if that is increasing, it means we're probably going to get more increase in consumer inflation. However, it has another tool in its arsenal, which it's still using, and that's unwinding its balance sheet. Its balance sheet has come down dramatically, but it's still much greater than it was before COVID. If they just leave the rates where they are, because again, markets like stability, and you want to wait until Trump gets into office to see how things are going to respond. And you know, if RFK gets his way and takes out all the pesticides and food inflation skyrockets, you know, then he may need to increase rates again. But until then, we could probably just pause, focus on the money supply, bringing it down, and see what the new year brings in. What they don't have to do is race to cut even more. That would be the mistake.
You also have to factor in, you know, holiday demand driving prices up. That happens every year. It's not like this is an out of the ordinary trend that we're seeing. On now to our last laugh, a segment where we get to take a look at some of the lighter stories that happened in politics this week.
There was no one more joyous, more enthusiastic, and smiling and vivacious this week in Washington, D.C. than Joe Biden and Jill Biden introducing Donald Trump back into the White House. It is incredible. I mean, think about it. Like 2 months ago, he was comparing this guy to Hitler, calling him a fascist and all of his supporters garbage. And then in the Oval Office, they're like just two Donnie from Queens and Scranton Joe at the bar, having a cold one, embracing each other. Jill glowing with a handwritten note for Melania Trump. I mean, I think, you know, Donald Trump loves getting to hang out with his voters.
Oh, are you saying the Bidens voted for Donald Trump? I'm not so sure about that one. But I do think you're onto something because, again, there's all this talk about tension between the Biden and the Harris teams. And we actually saw at the Veterans Day Memorial down at Arlington Cemetery on Monday, Jill Biden actually gave Kamala Harris quite the cold shoulder. I do think there's some real resentment still about Biden getting pushed out. And we do know Jill Biden is essentially his top advisor, even though she doesn't work in an official capacity.
She's like Edith Wilson running the White House.
Nancy Reagan, yeah, in the second term. But again, I do think it was sort of strange. And one thing that I love to see was all of the EEOB, the Eisenhower office building staffers, come out and just stare by the hundreds when Donald Trump showed up on the South Lawn. They said it was like an oddity, it was a curiosity, but I think secretly some of them are happy to be getting out of that building.
Yeah, no, you can pretend you think he's a fascist or whatever, but are you not entertained?
Are you not entertained?
All right, we had a huge week for Doge. I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but not only the Bitcoin, obviously Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk are also going to be joining the Trump administration, heading up what's being called the Department of Government Efficiency. Tiana, do you think this is actually going to work, or is this just more of a sideshow and something we should expect over the next couple of years with Trump?
I mean, so technically we already have the Government Accountability Office, which does reap a pretty good return on its investment in terms of trying to find ways to cut corners. That being said, I do welcome this specifically because of who they have running it, right? Vivek Ramaswamy, this is his world. He knows how to fix balance sheets. And he's a really brilliant guy when it comes to the financial elements of the government. Elon Musk is brilliant in his own just totally uncomparable way, right? Like there's not really a good corollary to Elon Musk in any other country in terms of what he does. That being said, I expect like their first white paper to Trump, like Ramaswamy is going to prepare like a 200-page dossier detailing, you know, pull out this NIH funding and give it instead to the CDC. And Musk's recommendation is going to just say, you know, cut $420 million and also 69 cents.
I wouldn't be surprised if this office that Elon and Vivek are heading up goes after the SEC, because they're definitely going to open an investigation after Dogecoin, the crypto that Elon is so heavily leveraged in, had a huge spike. And I'm, sorry that some people might take their financial advice from Elon Musk's Twitter account, or his X account, I guess I should say. But if you're in Doge, this is a good sign, right? Because he lost everything before, and now we're back.
So Kamala Harris is engaging in the time-honored tradition of showing the heartwarming, relatable, lovable photos that she should have shown during the campaign after she lost.
Yeah.
Right? Over the weekend, you had her niece, Mina Harris, show the vice president playing Connect 4 with her grandnieces. It is adorable. It is like, we never got to hear so much about Harris as a grand aunt.
Yeah.
Or even, you know, her sister had her daughter, Mina Harris, when she was a teenager. And it seems like Kamala was pretty involved in helping her raise her daughter. Like, that would have been a very inspirational story, especially for like pro-lifers who are iffy about abortion bans, hearing from Kamala about helping her sister choose life and whatnot. She apparently, though, could have a second act, because in a recent poll, she came out on top for a list of prospective governors for California. It'd be a weird thing, but is it possible?
I mean, it's certainly possible, and obviously she is popular. She was elected to the Senate in California, right? And like, she made it to the presidential stage, although she got crushed in the 2020 primary and obviously lost this election. But I want to double back on something you said, because if she does run for governor, one thing she should learn from 2024 is she needs to humanize herself more. And I think that's exactly what these photos are doing.
Go on Rogan.
Or just go on Joe Rogan, either or. Although that probably won't play too much in the California gubernatorial election.
Although, you know what the photo reminded me of? Kamala Harris, it's easy to forget that she's 5 years younger than the American retirement age. She looks phenomenal.
Take notes, Donald Trump.
Let us know in the comments who won this week's Clash, and don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. In the meantime, visit the washingtonexaminer.com and subscribe to the magazine. I'm Tiana Lowe, Doescher.
And I'm Christian Datoc.
And we will see you next week.